Hello everyone, good evening. We'll call to order the emergency meeting of the Saugus Board of Health. Today is September 26, 2023. We only have one agenda item. This is the emergency meeting of the Board of Health as it pertains to the noise event at Wind Waste Incorporated, 100 Salem Turnpike, occurring on 9/25/23 at approximately 8:30 p.m. So, some ground rules. Many of you were here the last time we did something like this. Everyone will keep it respectful and sophisticated. There will be no outbursts. If there are outbursts, I'll adjourn the meeting and we go home. And nobody will get their points across. Nobody is on trial here. So please, keep it sophisticated. This is how we're going to do things. Wynn will get a chance to address the board. We will then ask questions. I will then allow for a public comment period. Everyone who wants to speak will get an opportunity. I'm just going to pick people at random. Throw your hands up when we open it up. Your comments will address the Board of Health, not Wind Waste. That is non-negotiable. They are not on trial here. This is not going to get contentious like it did last time. We will then conclude the meeting. The board will then confer with the Director of Public Health, Mr. Freilich, and Town Council, Mr. Vassapoli, on what actions we can take. Those will be made public as soon as the board reaches a consensus. Having said that, thank you all for showing up. I expected a packed house. It's pretty hot in here. So we're going to get things rolling right now. So Wind Waste Innovations, who will be addressing the board? Mr. DeCecco.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
Good evening, community members. Before I get into the explanation of what happened, let me introduce myself. I'm Peter DeCecco. I'm Senior Vice President of Operations. My responsibility covers all the waste to energy facilities throughout Wind Waste Innovations. To begin with, I do want to apologize to the community, to the board, for the event that happened last night. It certainly was not expected, and it's something that we expect better performance from. And I want everyone to know how sincerely sorry I am. Moving forward, explanation of what happened.
Please.
Okay. So, at approximately 8:18 p.m., a routine weekly test was conducted of the turbine main steam stop valve. This stop valve is the protection of steam going into the main turbine. During this test, the valve completely closed versus closing slightly and opening back up. Essentially, all the steam that is supposed to go to the turbine now needed to go to the drag valve and silencer. Upon testing this main stop valve and it malfunctioning, the drag valve did not open automatically, causing the boiler safety relief valves to open and the steam to be vented through one safety relief valve for each boiler. When this occurs, it results in extremely loud noise, and we all heard it. The loud noise is due to significant velocity and volume of steam leaving the boiler at one time. The immediate response of plant personnel was to manually open the drag valve as the plant was immediately taken offline. After approximately 22 minutes, the drag valve was opened, the steam vented through the silencer, and the noise abated. This steam silencer was installed in 2021. And there's been many instances which steam has been vented through the drag valve and been visible, but not audible, working as designed. Last night was the first time there's been a noise issue, as mentioned during the opening. We're sincerely apologetic for it happening, but it was the first time that we had a malfunction of this silencer since it's been installed. However, we do understand that the audience doesn't care that it's worked 99.97% of the time. It did not work last night. We greatly appreciate the quick response of the Saugus and Police Fire Departments, who came to the plant to ensure there was no issue other than the sight and sound of steam. At no time, and I want to reiterate this, at no time was there a risk to public health or safety. The safety valves operated as expected, and the steam was safely, even though it was loud, routed through the boiler safety valves as designed. Next steps. But before I move on to next steps, I do want to make sure that the audience understands that the facility was fully manned. We had 6 people on site. The plant manager responded within 15 minutes and he was on site. We had 3 other individuals who weren't working come to the facility to make sure everything was being handled according to plan. So what are the next steps? First thing this morning, we had the valve contractor on site troubleshooting to determine both issues. 1, why the main steam stop valve test went bad, and 2, why the drag valve and silencer didn't work. The main stop valve issue was determined to be a failed solenoid. That solenoid was replaced, tested, and deemed back to normal operations. No issue was found with the drag valve or silencer. The cause was determined to be that the valve was closed for a length of time that prevented it from coming freely off the valve seat. We not only had one valve contractor in who installed the drag valve and silencer, we also had a second opinion done through another company called NYNE. In May, the boiler facility, the facility had a scheduled cold iron, which means the facility was completely offline at that point in time. We did an inspection of the drag valve and silencer, and everything was deemed acceptable, in good order. Before we came back online last night, we exercised the valve 5 times while the facility was returning to normal operations, and the drag valve and silencer worked as designed. We've generated a preventive maintenance work order to exercise the valve once a month moving forward to ensure the valve is able to freely move from the closed position. And since the incident was precipitated by a test that we proactively conduct, we will conduct that test during daytime hours, so we don't have a disruption like this again. Last night's event was completely unexpected, considering how often this routine test has been run and the number of times the silencer and drag valve has worked. I don't expect this explanation to make anyone who was inconvenienced by the situation last night change their opinion. I've been in this position for 4 years. I come and speak to the board every month to discuss the operations of the facility. And I'm extremely disappointed that we inconvenienced the community last night. I simply ask that our apology be accepted, along with my vow to continue to do whatever it takes to run this facility efficiently and as safely as possible. I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. So you answered all the questions I already written down around root cause analysis. I had another question about a third party. So you mentioned you had 2 separate valve contractors on site. Did they commit at separate times?
Yes, they did.
Did they both come to the same conclusion
Yes, they did.
around the solenoid?
The solenoid for the main stop valve, which we had our internal EC and I team also troubleshoot
Okay.
and adjust, and the same conclusion on the drag valve.
Okay. So you said that they tested them and The solenoids were in perfect working order.
The drag valve was in perfect working order. The solenoid on the main stop valve that caused the issue was found to be faulty and
Okay.
replaced.
Okay, I don't think you mentioned it was replaced. I'm sorry if I missed that.
I probably didn't.
No, okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, I'm glad they were on site at different times and they both came to the same conclusion. You mentioned preventative maintenance. Why only once a month? Why not bi-weekly?
We certainly can do that, Jim.
I think we should do that because, as you can see, this
Yep.
affected quite a few people in town.
We'll take that action. We'll make it bi-weekly.
Because, I mean, once a month, sure, that all sounds good, but if you're testing on the 30th of November, and this happens on November 1st, we're gonna be here November 1st. And I agree with you, you're very good, Mrs. DeCecco, you appear every month. Either you or Mr. Brady, you both give a thorough operational update, and you have informed us that the silencer is working as planned. Now, obviously, last night was not something anybody wants. It was a major inconvenience. I live in Precinct 10. My parents live in Precinct 10. I see a ton of Precinct 10 people here, as well as people from faraway precincts. So this was a town-wide event, in my opinion. It wasn't just limited to Precinct 10 or to the Revere area or Lynn, which they normally seem to be. So obviously, I mean, a couple of years ago, we had the whole thing in the summer, which led us to the silencers. And the fact that, in my opinion, this was a catastrophic failure. So I think the preventive maintenance needs to be increased, and I think these third-party contractors need to at least be on site once a month for an inspection.
Okay.
Just, now, you guys can appear before the board,
Yep.
and we can have that discussion, but this is just my feeling.
Sure. We absolutely can put that action plan together. When Elliot called me last night and told me about the event, and he called me approximately 8:45. The disappointment that I felt, as well as the questioning I had of how it failed, it's tough to explain and put into words. I do feel that what we've done in the last 3 years together as a board and as a company, that this was going to be a significant event, and I don't
Yep.
blame the community for being upset. I've been in those situations where boiler safety valves have gone off, and it's a startling event. And again, I apologize to the community for it happening.
I, for one, can tell you're sincere, and I know how serious you take this stuff. So again, I appreciate you appearing here today. I just have one final question. So this was an unprecedented event that we've not seen happen before, correct?
As far as the safety,
As far as pretty much, you basically said everything kind of broke down.
yes.
Okay.
Since the new drag valve and silence has
Right,
been installed,
exactly,
yes, correct.
exactly.
Yes.
So you stated there was no risk to public health. How do we know that? This has never happened before.
Well,
I'm talking about all this new equipment.
yes.
I'm not talking about 3
Yeah.
years ago.
Right.
Since you guys have installed this, this has not happened.
Right, it hasn't.
Right. So this is an unprecedented event.
It's an unprecedented event, but the safety valves
Yep.
that are designed to lift
Okay,
operated as designed.
okay,
So I can say confidently that the public wasn't at harm because those safety valves worked according to design.
okay,
Those safety valves are certified by the ASME and Department of Fire Services for the state of Massachusetts and checked on an annual basis.
okay.
Personally, I've been in this profession for 30 years. I've never seen a safety valve fail, and these safety valves work according to design. So that's how I can tell you that the public was not at any harm at any time whatsoever.
Okay, with respect to those comments, and thank you, we'll consider those comments as a board, but just for my fellow board members, I think we should consider not only Tech Environmental, but another third party to go in and review what the safety impact of this kind of event is. And I'm not saying we're going to recreate it,
Yep.
just for giggles, but where it is, you've said it already, the safety valves worked. That's great. But this is the first time we've seen it. And before this board can look at the constituents of Saugus and say there was no safety risk at all, I want to make sure we have proper data and proper documentation to state that.
Sure. I can also reiterate that the Department of Public Safety, the chief inspector called us
Okay?
and asked us what exactly happened. He did hear the news, and he was perfectly satisfied with the reaction of the safety valves as well as the team that was at the facility at the time.
Okay. Thank you for that. Good point. I'll open it up to my fellow board members for any questions or comments.
Oh, I'm just not clear on what did fail. The first valve shut when it was supposed to
Right.
close
So,
up.
so the
Then
first,
what was the part that failed? You said your safety valves.
yep. So the main stop valve has two solenoids on it. When you go to test the main stop valve,
Right.
you actually hit the test button. It's supposed to hit a lower solenoid, and when it hits that lower, engages that lower solenoid, the valve opens back up.
Right.
That solenoid failed, and it shut completely. At that point in time, the steam needs to go somewhere, and the steam goes to the silencer. It's routed through the drag valve to the silencer. The arrangement of the piping has a manual stop valve, which was opened, and then it has what we call the drag valve. That drag valve conditions the steam before it hits the silencer. That drag valve did not open
Just from
in
disuse?
automatically.
And you're assuming that's just from disuse?
Correct,
It was stuck,
correct.
like an old valve in my
Yep,
cellar.
so we immediately dispatched operators up to that drag valve and manually opened it, and once it came off the valve seat, it free-wheeled open easily.
Mrs. Checo, is this something that's easily observable? Like if I show up tomorrow, can I see this?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually have a video on it. Elliot, last night when the situation happened, sent me a video.
Can you send that video to the board
Sure.
or to Mr. Freilich, and then he
Yeah,
can
sure.
disperse it?
It will show you the manual valve as well as the drag valve that was manually opened. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I can send it right after this. It's on my phone.
Any further comments from the board?
I just have a couple of questions.
Ms. Ciccolini?
Has there been any change in protocol that may have contributed to this happening?
No, ma'am.
There was also a similar incident in Connecticut with a similar type of situation, so that was why I'm prompting the question.
Yeah, no, ma'am. So the situation that you're talking about in Bridgeport, Connecticut was not a similar incident. That was a planned maintenance evolution at our Bridgeport, Connecticut facility, completely isolated from this event.
You said the silencer in this instance failed or malfunctioned at this point.
The drag valve going into the silencer was where we had it not open.
Is there any way to have a backup to that in case the primary one does malfunction or fail, that there's a secondary one to assist in alleviating noise?
We can certainly look into that situation. I can tell you right now, the current arrangement, current piping arrangement is not designed for that, but that's something certainly we can take away as an action.
Well, I do know in the past, the boilers have malfunctioned or tripped, whatever the situation may be. And I've said this before, so it's no new statement I'm making here. If this was in your home and it kept on tripping, making noise, causing a nuisance, you'd replace it. Has there been any consideration into investing in upgrades to the facility in terms of boilers or valves or anything to that matter?
Absolutely. I think one of my most important roles in my current job is making sure not only the Saugus facility, but the entire portfolio is upgraded and or running as efficiently as possible. As far as the Saugus facility, in the last 3 years, we spent over $75 million addressing concerns that you bring up, upgrading the facility, as well as replacing parts that have been installed since the conception of the facility. So that's something that is my main priority, as well as the VP of Operations, Elliot, the plant manager. It's something we're constantly looking at and consistently making upgrades and improvements to the Saugus facility.
I understand that, but many of us in this room also know that this facility would not be permitted today as it stands. It's your prerogative to purchase credits to operate at that level per the state. That's why I bring this question up to date, because it is an old facility. Also, you did say that there was no concern or harm to the health of the community. However, did you see the air quality monitor reports, pre and post event? Because they were high.
I haven't seen them.
Anybody can do that. They can go to the, I believe it's called Purple Air
Okay.
app, and they can see the data.
So what I can tell you is the steam that was emitted from this event, if it was condensed back into usable water, is as pure as the drinking water that you take out of your faucet. It goes through a robust RO system. It goes through a clarification process that removes all the impurities from that process, from that water. And the steam that was vented is that same water. There was nothing, there was no emission.
Was the water tested?
Excuse me? The water's tested on a daily basis.
Could we see the results of the test from the night of the event, please? Could that be shared
Sure.
with the board?
I can share that with the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No?
I have a quick comment, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Freilich?
So I do want to speak a little bit to what you mentioned regarding, I think what we're looking at in this particular situation is, sure, the acute condition that was caused via this solenoid malfunction or what have you may not have caused some type of acute public health condition. My main concerns are more with the secondary and the tertiary aspects of the event, because again, we were receiving complaints regarding this event, upwards of 300 calls according to our 911 dispatchers and what have you, and we'll hear from the chief tonight. And it's situations like that that more concern me regarding this whole situation, because again, I consider panic to be a public health issue. And what we see here tonight is something that was induced by this situation. So, I mean, again, as far as your response, I mean, it sounds as though that you've, taken the proper steps to ensure that this never happens again, and we appreciate that. And I can certainly speak to the relationship with Wind Waste and the town of Saugus since I've been here, and that you've been very transparent with your operations and what you plan on doing and your upgrades to the facility. Again, the public health issues that were arisen from this solenoid malfunction are further in depth than just the acute condition with the steam coming out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I think that what we need to do, and again, as a non-resident third party, I feel as though I'm looking at this objectively. I feel as though my position as a liaison to this legislative body, I feel though, Mr. Chair, that we'll be able to look into enacting some type of amendment to the town bylaws to just really, more be able to directly address situations like this, because there have been situations in my tenure here that have caused situations like, an undue panic to the general populace, especially in Precinct 10. So moving forward, I feel as though we're gonna need to really, focus on, again, being I know it's a cliche, but being proactive versus reactive in situations like this, because again, the worst thing that we can do is have to call meetings because of situations that happened last night. So again, moving forward, I feel as though we can certainly look a little bit deeper into amending town bylaws to directly, attribute to situations like this. Because again, moving forward, I feel as though, the panic that does get induced from, malfunctions and things like that are going to, continue to happen. I mean, because again, these are unforeseen events and no one's saying that they're not, and there's no possible way to determine when these types of events are going to happen. So I feel as though we should have some things in place that would, again, be a little bit better as far as alerting the general populace as to, the situation that's happening. I know that you guys have been a lot better with, notifying the public, but, it's one of those things where we're looking at it from the standpoint of it could always get better, and I feel as though we're gonna need to, continue to improve on that.
To address your comment about, public safety, Ellie and I were talking today, And, I did want to make sure that my apology was heard, but I also do want to apologize to the police department, the fire department, because when they're handling 300 calls on a noise event, my biggest fear is that there is someone struggling who actually needs to use 911 and they can't because of an event that we caused.
Agreed.
So, again, I thanked the Saugus Fire Department and Police Department, but I also want to extend an apology to the teams because of that.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you. Good comments, Mr. Freilich. Thank you. We'll certainly take that under advisement. Anything else from the board?
I just wanted to make a comment about the assault to especially people closest to the event, like the police and the fire and your employees and the people closest to the noise. I mean, I heard it where I live by the vet school, and I didn't think my ears were being assaulted, but, certainly the people that are closer to there are having this, loud noise, and there is some, sort of public, there is a health issue to the assault on their ears. So, that's another thing I thought of when I heard of like health and safety, and I thought about that. And, the police officers, like you said, and the fire department that comes there, they're having that loud noise and that constant, assault on their ears. So that's another thing that I thought of as being a health issue for the people in the closest to the area and the people responding. So I just didn't want people to think that we weren't being cognizant of the fact that the noise level and the decibels can be a problem. So just a comment from me about
No,
that.
no, absolutely. And before we came here, we spoke to the shift that was on last night, and that was certainly one of the topics of discussion that we had. I thanked them for what they did. I asked how they were doing. I mean, it's a startling situation for the community, but when you're actually going through that at the power generation facility, it's a stressful situation. And I'm very proud of how they reacted, and I thank them. So, and then the fire department was exposed, the police department was exposed, and I'm sincerely sorry for that.
Anything further from Mr. DeCecco?
No, I just wanted to make a statement that, to piggyback on what my fellow board member just said, was, I was on phone with family friends. One of my friends has a 93-year-old mother who was so panicked that she wanted to evacuate her home. I want you to understand that puts that elderly person at such a great risk for health things that it is an issue. It's not just the sound, it's the impact on what that stress of that situation could be. So I just want that to be stressed out there, that we need to do something so we do not have another catastrophic noise event of this caliber. It's just not good for anybody. I used to live closer to the plant in East Saugus, so I know the noise that comes from there, and I shouldn't be used to it. But I live further away now, and I could hear it just as well as my friend who lives in Precinct 10, just so you know. And I live in this area here on Central Street.
Understood.
Thank you. Anything further? Thank you, Mr. DeCecco. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Before we open up to the general public, I see our Chief of Police here. Chief Riccadelli, do you want to address the board?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like to kind of inform everybody. Obviously, this was the primary response was from the fire department, but just want to let everybody know how we were impacted. The police department oversees the public safety dispatch center. So last night, obviously, approximately 8:21, we received our first of many calls for an extremely loud noise coming from the wind waste facility on 107. The Saugus Fire Department was immediately dispatched to the area. Saugus Dispatch then attempted to make contact with the control room at Wind Waste. However, they were unable to make contact with anybody over there. Over the course of the next 27 minutes, we received approximately 400 calls of the noise complaint coming from the facility. At the time of the incident, we had 2 dispatchers working in the dispatch area. We had to call in 2 police officers who were assigned to other duties to help answer the calls. Calls were coming in on both the emergency 911 line and on the business line. After 27 minutes, dispatch was finally notified by the fire department that the noise had stopped and that there were no injuries. Noise complaints typically aren't called in on the 911 line, as it's reserved for emergencies only. However, many of the people who were calling on the 911 lines were extremely scared, asking if they needed to evacuate the area. Some of the callers believed that a plane had crashed in the area. They'd never heard the noise coming from the facility this loud, I think, for this long. We could have had someone trying to call in on an emergency 911 line for a serious crime, a fire, a medical emergency. I know that's already been talked about. So I think that's what's most concerning to me, that the response time could have been slowed down. You'll never not get an answer on 911. However, after so many rings, it gets bumped to another facility. So if our 911 lines are all busy, you won't get a busy signal. However, it'll get bumped. In our case, Linfield's our backup, so it'll go to Linfield. And again, and a bunch of calls last night did go to Linfield. However, luckily there were no emergencies going on during that 27 minutes, so it didn't affect anybody. But I think it has been addressed, and a lot of you have the same concerns as me, is that it could have. So I think our hope in the future is that we have better communication with the facility, because again, if we knew, the fire department knew going in, or we knew at some point before the end of the noise that, you know, nobody was hurt, nobody was in danger, you know, we could have taken some other steps, maybe put something out on social media to let the people know, and that way they won't be calling the station to trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, and I don't blame them. I took calls on my cell phone last night. I don't live in precinct 10. I live a couple hundred yards away. So I had neighbors, most of them new neighbors. I think people that have lived in that area for a while had a good idea of what it was, but a lot of new people to the area had no idea, and were scared, and it was new to them. So like I said, if we take anything away from this on our end, I'd like to see, you know, better communication. And I know when there's a box alarm or things like that, we normally call the control room. Someone's there to answer it. Obviously, this was a big incident. All hands were probably on deck in other parts of the facility, but it would have been a big help to us if there was somebody in that control room that could have let us know what we were walking into and what the fire department was walking into. Thank you.
Chief Newberry. Thanks for coming.
Anytime. So we received a call 8:21 p.m. and responded down for a noise complaint. All companies went down to Resco, called for mutual aid coverage because we weren't really sure what we had down there. And that's when my phone starts beeping and doing things, and I start paying attention, turn my radio on. And there really weren't many radio communications, but to piggyback what the police chief just said is on our day shift, we have a fantastic relationship with WIN, especially the fire prevention staff. The Board of Health does, and police is probably to a lesser degree, but we deal with this facility on an ongoing basis, and that was the only thing that we really expressed this morning, was the lack of communication to the control room. And I understand completely with what Chief Riccadelli said, it's all hands on deck at that point. And the number one concern when we get down there is a couple different rally points, so we know where to go, we know where to seek out staff and things like that. And when we get down there, we went to our normal rally point, and having 6 people on duty, it sounds like, you know, that's really not a lot for a facility like that, but that is actually a pretty big staff at night. And we were looking for help and sort of trying to figure it out, but our main concern was the safety of the employees there at that point. And it's funny, we do so many things. I have hearing issues because of my job, and what we do is we do have good hearing protection. But the communication was difficult. We now have Elliot's phone number, and we'll put that through dispatch. We'll be able to call and contact, the plant manager at a moment's notice, but at that point in time, we were really only on scene for about 20 minutes. And, we don't really deal with noise complaints and things like that. I will say this, this isn't to like pat anyone on the back. It's just more of an informative thing. I've been doing this job as the chief for 8 years. And 5 years before that, I was in fire prevention. So I have 13 years experience dealing with wind waste, and they have spent millions of dollars satisfying the fire department when it comes to sprinkler systems, standpipe systems, and rerouting a fire alarm. So to your point, Mr. Ciccolini, it is an older place. And at the same time, just putting a new fire alarm system into a facility like that takes more than a smile and a handshake. So we have worked well together, but it's for two reasons, and it's not the reasons you think. We work well together to protect the staff on scene and protect the firefighters responding there, because it is an industrial facility. We do have quite a robust and active fire prevention staff in Saugus. We do about 3,000 service calls a year just out of the fire prevention office, but that's our only unique industrial complex down there. But I will say we have a good working relationship. Communication could have been better at that point in time. We understand completely what was going on. And luckily no one got hurt. I understand completely the community's being here today and understand the curiosity and being upset, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Chief. Chief Newberry, Chief Riccadelli, thank you both very much for being here. Much appreciate the comments. Okay, we're going to open it up, but just one comment from the chair. For those of you that submitted emails, I received dozens. I'm not going to read those all into the record. The email, not everyone was on a lot of them. I will send them out to the board. They will all be read. They will all be considered regarding future actions. This is not falling on deaf ears. And again, I will be here till tomorrow morning if I read all the emails. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to the general public for comment. Anyone? Sir.
I'd like to address a question to the chief, fire department, if I might, in deference to the public safety people for this town. First of all, did Wind Waste call the fire department, or were you gone on that call based on the resident's call? Who was the person that initiated you to make your way down there?
It was an overwhelming amount of calls for noise complaint.
All right. You say you were there for 20 minutes or thereabouts.
About 30, yes.
I don't have to tell you that when you arrive on that scene, you own that place. You own it. And my point is, to the Wind Waste people, did they fully, to your satisfaction, cooperate with what you folks were trying to do to get the answers to your questions as to what happened? Did they explain everything to you to your satisfaction before you left that facility?
That's actually a good question, and I apologize for not addressing that in the initial statement that I made. Yes, when we made contact with the people on scene, they did tell us that no one was hurt. They told us what the problem was. But again, I will say there was frustration from our department standpoint getting in touch with somebody. So it did take, 5 to 10 minutes before we really made contact with the people at the facility. So we did have to figure that out and dig that out a bit. And when it comes to, overall communication, we do get pretty good communication through WIN, especially on the day staff. That being said, to address one of the points that you made, the second the noise started, there was just a rapid fire of social media posts going up, and I see it all. I'm on all the local websites to keep track on all my friends in local government and things like that. And there was misinformation putting out that there was an explosion on the facility, and that's where, I would be more sensitive if I was on scene. It didn't warrant at that moment that the event ended for me to drive there post-event. But if I was on scene, that kind of information wouldn't have got out to the public at that time. I would have consulted with the staff and the police chief and put the message out correctly.
I mean, they're behooved to cooperate with you and your people on whatever you want from them once you walk into that place.
I think it bothers certain people in certain moments, but fully understand the awesome responsibility that I am in charge and my representatives are on scene in those moments. And sometimes it's more of a personality issue. In some places, I have very few interactions with wind waste in emergency settings, and so,
When you left, you were satisfied.
yes,
Thank you. Thanks again, Chief.
anytime.
Again, folks, I probably should have mentioned this. There's quite a few people here. If we could limit your comments to 5 minutes, that would be very much appreciated. I want to give everyone an opportunity, and I want to make sure the library staff can get home. Anyone else? Mrs. Panada.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board
evening.
members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deborah Panetta. I live at 1 Bellevue Street. Obviously, well, you could looking at the crowd, people are very concerned because of the deafening noise, which could be heard from miles away. That's why everybody is here tonight. I agree with what was said. I think we could have had better, faster communication between the town and wind waste. And if we could do something in the future to make it faster, make it quicker, so that people aren't so scared when they hear things or see things. Because sometimes there's steam coming up, people are driving down 107 all the time, people live in that neighborhood, and there are concerns. Many of us drove down to the facility to see what happened last night, while others sought cover, not knowing what was going on, and they were fearful. They were very, very fearful. It was real, and it can't be dismissed. And I think we all received dozens of calls. I'm sure you being the Board of Health, you must have received dozens and dozens of calls last night and this morning trying to figure out what was going on. And I do appreciate the post from the firefighters. I think that was very helpful, and we were able to share that on social media, because a lot of people do participate in social media. I don't personally understand how I do appreciate Wynn coming tonight, and I do appreciate very much the Board of Health holding this emergency meeting, because to try to alleviate the concerns that we have in our neighborhoods. But I don't know how it got out of hand the way it did without a safety feature that would have been in place to just shut it down when it originally happened. And perhaps to Ms. Ciccolini's point, it being the oldest facility in the nation, maybe there are some upgrades that are needed. I know that it was mentioned that only steam went into the air, and they talked about the safety valves working properly, but again, it was mentioned about the purple air monitors and the emissions. It looked like it was through the roof. It was very concerning, and I do hope the Board of Health takes a look at that, because I am concerned of the emissions and what's in it and the health impact of our neighborhoods. And just lastly, I attended, as you know, the Board of Health meeting last week, and I was concerned about the medical waste and the international waste that was taken to the incinerator. That was a surprise to all of us, and if we could follow up on that, it'd be very much appreciated. And again, I sincerely appreciate you holding this emergency meeting tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Manoogian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Health, members of the public, Peter Manoogian, town meeting member, precinct 10. Although it hasn't been asked, several points need to be made. This is definitely the loudest we've ever heard. And I'm wondering if the cure was worse than the disease in terms of the silencer, because before there would be smaller outbursts that the public, I don't want to say accepted, but recognized was something happening with the plant. I don't know why this particular venting was much, much louder than we've ever experienced before, to the point where, as I walked down there, it was sort of like precinct 10 night out. People were thinking that the place was going to blow up, and some of them were quite joyful over that possibility. But anyways, I want to make a couple of constructive suggestions, if I may. I think that this gentleman should have his cell phone in the memory of both the fire chief and the police chief. I think that they should be able to contact you immediately. I know you don't live in the area, but apparently you take your job responsibly quite well. And it's a tough job. You've got the oldest incinerator. There's a lot of things that break down there. it's the equivalent of a 1975 Vega. I mean, you know, it's old. My concern that, and I hope the Board of Health takes this into consideration, this, you make it sound like this is just spring water, Poland Springs coming out of this steam, but boilers have treatment, chemical substances in the feed water. I would think that you do to prevent corrosion, damage to the steam system. And in addition to various chemicals in the feed water, that can be carried into the steam. So my question through you, Mr. Chairman, perhaps, and I would ask that you perhaps get a third-party consultant to analyze what is coming out of that, what is in that steam, what are they adding into the boiler, into that steam water, so that it's not corroding the system and the pipes and so forth. We're taking it for granted that this steam is harmless. I don't know that it's harmless. I'd like some third-party evidence that you can provide, and not their word, but that you can provide to the town of Saugus, that that steam coming out of that plant does not have chemicals or anything that has a potential adverse health effect. And if they are adding chemicals into that feed water, there has to be material safety data sheets that are available that can be looked at. I do think, you know, the apology's nice, but I would ask that Wheelabrator, Lewin, consider, I know you give a lot of money out in the community, but I think you should pay for what this cost the town of Saugus public safety last night. There's a cost that can be attributed to our ladder truck, to our engine one, our police, and so forth. And I think that you should pay for that. Normally there'd be a fine associated with an incident like this, but I think you should step up and pay for this incident that cost the taxpayers last night. So those are my suggestions, and I want to thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman, and hope you consider them.
Thank you. Nothing is off the table. Anyone else? Ms. Mercurio.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good evening. Thank you so much to the board for holding this emergency meeting tonight. It is definitely appreciated, and seeing a quick response from the Board of Health is really great. Obviously, the Precinct 10 heard probably the loudest noise they've heard in a long time, if not the loudest, from Wheelabrator. And one interesting thing is that it actually reached all of Saugus. I know I've talked a lot about over the years that it's a Saugus problem, and a lot of people from Saugus turn their back and say it's a Precinct 10 problem, but it's actually, last night was a town problem. And it was like a realization for a lot of people, I think. Two quick things that I really thought were important that I saw kind of go over the past 24 hours almost was, one, we talked about for the past 3 years at the subcommittee having Wheelabrator or Win do a reverse call or robocall during emergencies. Mm-hmm. I thought that last night's event really would really kind of solidified that idea. There were people terrified, wanting to know if they should evacuate, wanting to know if the place blew up. I even drove down there myself. So I think a robocall would be one step to really start to press on to Win. The other thing is the air quality monitors. I am a broken record here at the Board of Health about air quality monitoring. We currently in town, the town of Saugus worked with Mass DEP to get the Purple Heart monitors. I've said time and time again, not the best monitors, but something is better than nothing. Last night they skyrocketed to almost 1,000 in 2.5 p.m. Particulate matter. And just for a reference, over 100 is dangerous for a lot of our population. So I think that is not only super important to evaluate that number, but also maybe look to see if we can get a more robust monitoring system put in place, because measuring one thing, which is 2.5 particulate matter, is not enough for us at this point. I think that after this incident, we could definitely use a little bit more robust. I don't know if it's working with the state or what we can do, but definitely, I hope that you'll evaluate that.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
My name's Jeremy. I live in Precinct 10 off Dudley Street. Lived here about 10 years now. For the first time last night, I actually thought, like, should I evacuate? Is there a plan? Is that a possibility? Is there a plan in place for that?
Evacuation plan?
Mm-hmm.
To my knowledge, I don't know.
Should there be?
Chief? No.
Like, how are we supposed to know what to do? And I have young kids at home. And the other thing, on top of preventive maintenance, I do HVAC for a living. Some parts have like certain lifespans. Could these valves just be changed on a yearly basis to prevent things like this? Instead of just testing them, just change them. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Everyone over here. Mr. Ciccolini. I'll get to you.
Thank you for having this tonight for the Board of Health, ladies and gentlemen. So obviously, I don't want to sound like a broken record, so I'm not going to reiterate everything that was said, but I do feel as though, to mention to the previous two speakers ago, mentioned about the air quality monitors, I think we need to ask that it be, the cost be borne by WIN to have the monitors installed at various locations throughout our community, not just in Precinct 10, and have that data readily available to our public, to our residents. I think it's important so people can see it and understand what's out there and what's happening. And I was put in a very tough situation last night because I had neighbors walking through my neighborhood. I used to live in Precinct 10. I live in Precinct 5 now. And, you know, obviously it was loud. We could hear it just as loud. But, you know, I had neighbors calling me who have older relatives who live in Precinct 10, and they were talking about evacuation, and I didn't have answers. And, you know, of course, I'm reaching out, trying to text people to ask what's going on. My wife's on the scanner. And so the point of the matter is, I feel like, you know, WIN's trying to do the best. I don't admire the position you're in. I know it's a tough situation to be in. You're just doing your job. I get it. You don't make these decisions. But I also think, Mr. Chairman, we have to have some type of an agreement with WIN where we can have our own independent engineers and people go in and look at that machinery. We have to be able to have our people, not people that WIN's paying, not people that they think we should pay. I think we have to have our people we want to engage to go in and inspect these boilers for safety. And also, to two previous speakers ago, or actually it was to a Precinct 10 town meeting member, how do we know what the steam is and what's in that steam? We don't know what we don't know. The air quality monitor went up to 1,000. Okay, does that mean at 2,000 people start dying? Like, I don't even know, to put that in context, I don't even know what that means. So I think we need to do a better job educating the public about these levels and to try to stop this type of, people were literally freaking out. And it was a scary situation for a while. And I think we, you know, I'm looking for WIN to be a community partner that they want to be. Well, then you gotta step to the plate and be that community partner. And that includes bearing the cost. A great suggestion, Precinct 10 reimbursing the town for our costs incurred. But let's see if we can get some more monitoring tools to settle down some, or to subside some of the public stress and anxiety with air quality monitors, and have some independent people go in and look at what's going on. I think that would go a long way with the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Serino, I will get to you all, I promise.
First of all, I want to thank the Board of Health for being here tonight. I really appreciate you guys coming out in a short notice like this. I know you're a volunteer board, and I know, you do a lot of work for the town. And I want to just pick up on what your Board of Health Director said, John Freilich. He said it's not only your hearing or a noise issue, it's a health issue. And I tell you, I was a nervous wreck. I lived the closest to that plant, and I didn't know what to do. I went in a little room, shut the door, tried to call. I talked to the town manager. I could barely hear him. So it's not just a noise issue. But, I've heard a lot of speakers say, how do we going to fix the plant, update the plant, this and this. The root of the problem is the plant is the oldest plant in the nation. It's 50 years old. It needs to be shut down and a new one built, because this is not going to stop. I went through my file cabinet before I came here tonight. This issue has been going on since 2006. I have newspaper articles, reports from the state, and the state too isn't doing much either. It's funny, I read an article last week from the former Secretary of Transportation, Mr. Aliso, and he said how the state was, he was a transportation secretary, and he was looking to the MBTA to say that the MBTA is in the condition it's in today because they've been kicking the can down the road for 50 years. And this is what the state is doing in regards to solid waste. They have done nothing in 50 years. Every governor has been giving them an expansion of the landfill. They're kicking the can down the road. They need to shut the plant down and build a new one, as far as I'm concerned, because this problem is not going to go away. It will continue for another 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here.
Absolutely.
First of all, I'd like to introduce myself, Hugo Rizzuto. I'm from the other side of the river in Revere, Port-au-Pines.
Okay.
I represent, personally represent, but I'm here speaking tonight in behalf of the people of Port-au-Pines, Oak Island, and Riverside, who was just as mad as everybody here in this room. Okay, I'd like to recommend, by the way, half of the people are outside there. Next time, let's get a little bigger venue.
Yeah, it wasn't available, but
I'd like to, first of all, the gentleman that just spoke, I want you to know tomorrow at 1 o'clock at the State House, there's 3 bills being introduced by Representative Giannino and Turco, okay, precisely to start shutting this plant down. Okay, I encourage everybody here, 1 o'clock tomorrow at the State House, take the time, go there and speak your voice, okay? If you don't speak, nothing will happen. We have to shut the plant down. Now, in terms of the release yesterday, the wind, the steam came up, the water came down. I understand that, when it condensates, your steam comes down. However, the prevailing winds go over to Port-au-Pines. Last night, the prevailing winds were going to Port-au-Pines. That's where I live. That's where I live with my wife, who has a chronic lung condition, and I'm very concerned as to what's coming out of this plant over here. Air quality monitors, somebody just spoke on the air quality monitors. I'd like to ask you, how many air quality monitors?
Please direct your comments to the board, as I stated earlier.
I'm sorry.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to find out how many air quality monitors are installed on the other side of the river, at Port-au-Pines, the Riverside, and Oak Island.
You can find that out.
And whether those are monitored, if there are any installed, and where is the information, if there is information coming out of such monitors. Okay? And I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to speak. Again, tomorrow, 1 o'clock at the State House. If you can make it, please join us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Representative Giannino.
Thank you.
I see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Board. I figured that was a good segue into my comments. First of all, I want to really commend you. In less than 24 hours, this volunteer board was put together and was here to hear the concerns of the residents that are here today. And that's not an easy task, so thank you for making time to be here for such an important issue. I want to start by saying I live in the city of Revere. I've lived in the city of Revere my whole life. I represent the 16th Suffolk District. That's part of the city of Revere and precincts 3 and 10 in Saugus. In 30 years, I've lived in my home, and I've never heard the sound from my home. I've visited neighbors in the Point of Pine and Riverside. I know what that sounds like. I walked in my backyard with my father, who's a 33-year veteran of the police department. He didn't know what it was. And when I look at him and he doesn't know what it is, that's when I start to get nervous, because he's heard everything. I reached out to a non-emergency line to discuss what was going on with some public officials and found out it was coming from the plant. And I was horrified to know that 3.2 miles away from my home in Revere, I could hear it. I know what my neighbors in the Point of Pine and Riverside area deal with. I know what my constituents in precincts 10 deal with. But to hear it from 3 miles away is scary. And when we talk about our residents being afraid, it's not just seniors, it's children. 8:30 at night's bedtime for our young families. I had families calling me saying, Jess, my kids are scared. They don't know what's going on. I didn't know what to tell them. And that's a really scary situation to be in. Another concern I want to talk about, we talk about noise, our noise ordinances. I know I served in the Revere City Council. The city of Revere has strict noise ordinances, and I can tell you right now, they were in violation of all of those. If you were to stand in the Point of Pines and Riverside, that decibel meter would have been off the charts. So I hope that the city of Revere enforces their noise ordinance and takes action, but I also implore the town of Saugus to look at your noise ordinance. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I'm sure they're on the books, and I'm sure that this was a clear violation. I think apologies are great, but accountability is more important. And I'm so glad that we're having this meeting, we're having this open conversation, but I want to know that this is not acceptable. I want to know that there's going to be action taken and that our rules are going to be followed. You know, we've talked about emissions. I'm also concerned about emissions. You know, steam is dangerous. You can talk about steam being not dangerous. If you burn yourself cooking, we know how dangerous steam can be. Multiply that on a commercial level. I don't know what that looks like. I can't explain how dangerous that is, but I can tell you if 3.2 miles away I can hear it, it's a problem, and that's a concern. You know, some of the previous speakers talked about 99% of the time there's not a problem, and that's great. I'm so glad that there's not a problem 99% of the time. But anytime there's an emergency, and our first responders can tell you, it's that 1%, it's the less than 1% that's a problem. And that's why we're here tonight, because it's a problem. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm here to support you from the state level. This is not about my bills, but I'm happy to talk to anyone offline that wants to talk about them. But thank you for putting this together. And again, I look forward to hearing more about some enforcement for the noise ordinances, but also making sure this doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just 2 quick points. 50-year-old plant, did they monitor the air? Why do we have purple monitors around? Do they monitor what's?
They have comprehensive testing of what comes out of the stack.
Can we see that data?
I would assume so. We can get that.
Did they share that with you guys?
From last night?
Yeah, what's
Not yet.
coming out of that? Wouldn't that be the second thing?
Not
Once
yet.
their people are safe, wouldn't that be the second thing to look at, is health
Health, yes.
of the air?
Well, for me, the second thing is making sure the facility is not going to trip again.
Oh,
But yes.
Third
But
thing?
yes.
Okay. And then, lastly, the fire department did a great job releasing a statement of what was going on. Took a little while. They were busy. What's our town manager's role in understanding what's going on and communicating with the residents?
I can't answer that. I would recommend that you contact the town manager's office.
Okay. I don't know. Is he here?
I don't know.
Okay. I was just curious. I think we would hear from him last night. That's all. That's my only point.
Give him a job by himself.
Sir, could you just identify yourself, please, for the record?
Joe Quigenti, Precinct 1.
Thank you, Mr. Quigenti.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mr. Delios?
Hi, Peter Delios, Precinct 10, town meeting member. Also a member of the subcommittee of Wheelabrator on the Board of Health. We've worked with them for 2-3 years now. We've been working with them, and they've spent a lot of money to get the plant upgraded and whatnot, and that's great. But what bothered me listening to the chief and listening to the fire chief was that there was nobody that they could they were could contact. It took a while for them to get some contact. And I was just curious if there should be some kind of security guard or somebody there at Wynn for situations like that happen. And again, I also want to piggyback on what one of my colleagues said, that there should be a robocall, because I was getting inundated with neighbors in my precinct with calls, what's going on. And I think there should be a community robocall, because this is a Saugus event. This is not just a Precinct 10 event. Also, again, it would be advisable that we see the air quality reports of that night. I'd like to see that in our subcommittee meeting when we have that.
We will obtain that data as soon as humanly possible. I know quite a few of you have touched on it, and I agree. Communication was severely lacking at the facility. I was unaware of this until we heard from Chief Riccadelli and Chief Newberry, and this is something that will certainly be addressed with Wynn.
Why couldn't we get a dedicated channel for the police department and the fire department?
Nothing is off the table. I think that's a good point.
Well, I worked in Boston, and if the buildings, we had a problem, that's what happened. Our security and our maintenance department would be in communication with the fire department, what we had to do and what not to.
Again, nothing is off the table. I think this event just shows that the communication loop is severely lacking.
Because last night, I actually called after 20 minutes, and I got the control room.
Okay.
And those guys were in a panic. Yeah, you know, 6 guys dealing with that situation.
That will also be addressed.
Yeah, it's mechanical.
Thank you. Ma'am,
Hi.
could you please stand up?
So a lot of comments here today, especially, you know, everybody who saw this first time, they've ever heard anything like this, didn't know what to do. Unfortunately, we live it. We're, you know, this is where we live it, and we've experienced it all the time. So when it happened, we knew what it was. It was to the extreme. My house shook, our inside shook. We shut all the windows, ran downstairs, because like you said, we didn't know if it exploded, but we knew it was a stack, we knew it was a steam, because we hear it all the time. So for Wynn to come up there today to say this is the first time it's ever happened, well, that's, maybe that malfunction was the first time it ever happened, but it could be a weekly, it could be bi-weekly, it could be once a month. It was all summer long. It wakes us up 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. It could happen at 1 in the afternoon. You hear that steam blowing. And if you didn't live around there, and like many of you don't live in Precinct 10, so you've never heard it, we're used to it. We knew exactly what it was, but it was, again, did the place blow? Was it gonna, you know what I mean? And we just want to know why. Why, if you got that silencer in, why is it still happening? Why is that noise waking us up 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning? And like, it was to the extent my house shook, our inside shook. You know, my neighbor's elderly mother was like legit shaking. We thought we would have to call 911 because we couldn't calm her down. But we knew what it was because we're all used to it living there. And
Thank you.
We shouldn't have to be used to it. You know,
Agreed.
it's a noise ordinance that needs to, Saugus needs to step up to.
Anyone else? Sir?
Mike New with Precinct 10. I was just curious, since they're VPP certified by OSHA, it's been touched upon a couple times as emergency protocols in place for anything that goes on. I come from big pharma, where there's a lot of manufacturing, both with biologics, radiological waste, and there's protocols in place that, you know, the fire department interface with. You guys as a board would work with the chief and the chief of police to say, this is our action plan if there is, you know, X, Y, Z occurring. I was just curious if you guys have any of that in place, since the plan has been around for, sounds like, quite a while.
To my knowledge, no.
No, okay.
But I think this event is going to lead to something like that.
Okay. Do you guys partner in any way with OSHA? Do you have a key point of contact at OSHA?
Mr. Freilich?
Direct response at OSHA?
We do no.
No, okay. Could that be a possibility?
It's certainly something we can look
Okay,
into.
yeah. Also, too, is with the preventative maintenance, just checks, being OSHA certified, I was just curious if you guys also have access to preventative maintenance protocols, SOPs that are validated if that's shared with this committee?
They have not been in the past, they will be now.
Okay, is there like a separate facilities, like a Veolia, that can come in and look at the SOPs and say, that's familiar with these types of systems in place?
That's part of the third-party response I was discussing
Okay,
earlier.
okay. And also too, with the SOPs and protocols with regarding to training, being OSHA environment, everyone has to be trained that's on the facility.
Everyone will have to be certified.
Yeah, do you have access to those records? Who, what, where, why, with the type of training?
We have
remote
more or
training?
less access to anything at Wind Waste that we ask for.
I'm sorry?
We have access to pretty much everything at Wind Waste.
Okay, including training?
Yes.
Preventive measures?
I'm sure if we ask them
protocols?
for it, it'll be provided.
Okay, because typically...
Which is also on the list.
Okay, good, yeah, because typically with PMs, things aren't checked, they're replaced.
Right.
So just like a car, if the alternator's bad, you're not gonna take it out and rattle it, you're gonna replace the alternator. So I was just curious, given the large complexities of the systems, if they're not automated, what type of manual checks are in place and how often that goes on?
Valid points.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am?
So I would just actually utilize the microphone. I'm Melissa Tilton, Precinct 3.
There's one up there.
Is
too,
there
I
one up
believe.
here?
Isn't there?
So Melissa Tilton, Precinct 3, Elaine Avenue. Thank you for having this meeting. I really concur with everything that folks are saying, but I actually just need to advocate for folks. It's not an accessible meeting right now. We can't hear you, so I'm so happy that there's so many people here, but I think folks are kind of getting mixed messages out there. So next time, could we ensure that there's some type of system so that the meeting is accessible? We're really happy for this. Unfortunately, I do believe we'll probably have another one. And so concur with everything that everyone else has said, but please make these meetings accessible.
Valid point. The town auditorium was not available tonight.
I understand that. We
And
must have an accessibility coordinator
I
or
agree.
something.
And we thought it was
the best we could do with the
Yes.
last minute.
It was in the best interest of the, it was in the best interest of the town to have this meeting immediately versus to wait a few days.
Absolutely.
Sir, excuse me.
I work at the library.
Yes.
If I could just interrupt for a minute. We're
Please.
closing at 8. The
Yep.
staff is leaving at 8. Are you Tom?
No.
Is there a Tom Witteridge?
Tom Wittridge.
Tom just left. So he has the code for the door.
Okay.
To lock it. So if you're gonna stay past 8 o'clock, he can lock the door.
Okay, we'll take care of it.
All
Thank
right,
you.
so,
Promise.
I'm sorry.
He's gonna contact someone.
Okay, we'll lock the door. He needs to set the alarm code.
Perfect.
When he leaves. Okay?
Thank you.
so much.
Sorry for the inconvenience.
That's okay.
Anyone else? Sir?
I just have a quick question, Kevin McBride, Precinct 10. Is this facility EPA regulated?
It's regulated by pretty much every, the DEP, EPA, everyone.
They do evaluations?
To my knowledge, yes.
Quarterly. Incident reports?
Quarterly, thank you.
Sorry?
Quarterly evaluations.
And will they get reported this incident? Will that be reported to them?
Please, no questions for them. We
just said it out
will,
loud.
we will find out that answer.
And
I would assume yes.
When they will they evaluate that incident?
I would assume yes.
Okay.
It'll be a request from the town.
They will request it then?
Yes.
They will request that.
Yep. Anyone else? Sir? Excuse me, I know you already addressed us. Does anyone else want to go first? Hang on, Mrs. Riley.
I'll just stand on.
Please do. Yep.
Okay.
I just want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak to the board.
Good evening, Corinne Riley, 7 Ocean View Ave. I'm not going to repeat everything that was said. We all know how catastrophic that sounded last evening. But I do have a question.
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So we know the EPA, the DEP, you know, they look at the water, the air, all those things. But who from the state goes in and actually, like looks at the facility? You know, the boilers, who does that? And, excuse me, how often do they look at them? You know, so I'd like to know how, if it's just a private thing, is it their own workers? We say how antiquated it is. So I'm just curious to see who gives them the okay to keep going. So I guess that's my question. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Sir?
Thanks for coming, folks. We really appreciate it. The previous speaker spoke about somebody from the state overseeing what's going on here. And I'd tell her, speak to your state representative. And I know my state representative is not here tonight. And I haven't viewed him at all, and I don't know if he's here or he's not here. I look around, I check. And a lot of these edicts, like, I agree with Mike that this facility, the only real solution is to close it down and to move it to a more suitable location where these things aren't going to happen. And I also agree with the representative from Revere. The 1% of the time that something happens, it can be disastrous. I think some of us thought, maybe I was the only one, when it happened, another Chernobyl, with 1%, these things do occur, and it's not funny. These things do occur, and I don't want them to occur in my town, where I live. And as far as the noise, I have called on another matter about a month or two ago about the noise level is that being monitored. And the woman I was talking to was a very nice lady, and she says, as far as I know, we don't do that. It was for another matter. If you do it, maybe I was misinformed or misunderstood, if it happened or not. And as far as the air quality itself, sometimes I'll go out at night. Boy, does the air smell different than I'm used to. And I used to live in Everett, and right across the street, the factories, the White Pine Sash, and a whole bunch. We had noise that smells like that. And I know they used to put chemicals directly into the ground. That's where they eventually built another school for some crazy reason, back to beside the point. These things can only be solved, I think, in this particular instance, if we do as Mike said, and I agree with him 100%, let's close this facility down, let's move it to some other location where it won't affect all these people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone out in the hall? Sir.
Martin Costello, Precinct 10, Town Meeting. In deference to some of my neighbors who have mentioned some chapter and verse about the history of this plant, and as I've said many times, they have not been a good neighbor. As a means of illumination, and I think Mr. Heffernan and your board can recall this, on the 1st of August of 2019, the waste-to-energy plant was cited for a noise violation by the Saugus Board of Health after they received numerous complaints as to the excess noise coming from Wilburator, which was due to their shutdown of a turbine and the subsequent venting of that steam to the atmosphere. As an attempt to address this, it was required that they install a silencer to reduce the noise level that this steam was causing. I see you nodding in affirmation. You remember that?
Yep.
However, on the 15th of that same month, Wilburator had an attorney who claimed and disputed those violations, and he basically accused the Board of Health of overstepping their authority and citing that Wilburator for violating state law C10 CMR 710 as to noise levels emanating from their incinerator when they were doing repairs on those turbines. These contentions back then flew in the face of the facts that there were several instances going back to November of 2016 wherein excess noise emanating from their incinerator at greater than acceptable decibel levels for the abutters to this facility. My only point tonight, before I leave, is the Board of Health has a lot of latitude and a lot of authority here to impose violations on them for this latest one. And I suspect and I hope that that's going to be the case because it's the same situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sir.
I didn't hear much.
Can you please come in?
I don't need to come up there. I haven't heard much about inspections. I'm just curious if there are annual inspections of the plant.
Quarterly.
Quarterly, and is there any plans, like, does the state come in there and inspect the plant?
Yes.
Are they coming in now?
that's something we're gonna escalate that to the state and request that. Anyone else? Okay, in that case, just one last statement from me. I really appreciate everyone being here. I appreciate all the town officials being here. I appreciate our fire chief being here and our chief of police. I think hearing for them was extremely important regarding the overall incident. I appreciate wind waste officials being here and answering to the public and to the Board of Health. I just want to assure the general public, this is not falling on deaf ears. I myself live in Precinct 10, as I stated, so do my elderly parents. This was definitely a frightening incident. I will concur with some of the speakers that this is the loudest we've ever seen it, at least in my lifetime. So again, we are not going to adjourn this meeting and not take action. As was just stated, this board is empowered. We have a wide authority to impact the facility and hold them accountable. We will, once we adjourn, we will get together, not tonight, and we will talk to the Director of Public Health, Mr. Freilich, as well as Town Council, and get a better understanding of what we can do. A lot of comments about the robocall, the backwards robocall. I think that's a fantastic idea, as well as the dedicated communication loop between the police chief and the fire chief, as well as wind waste. I myself personally feel that no one was there to answer the call. That's just unacceptable, because I think if someone was there, it could have gone out to the police and fire that this is what happened. As I believe it was the fire chief said, somebody put out there that something exploded, and that's definitely a public health issue. We don't need a panic on our hands. There's enough panic around the facility as it is. So, but again, other issues, more robust air monitoring, third parties coming in to inspect the boiler equipment, as well as extensive preventive maintenance procedures or upgrading those with wind waste. But again, this is something that affected the entire town. It wasn't just Precinct 10. As you can see here, I mean, there's plenty of people in the hall. I apologize for the venue. We wanted to get this done immediately, given the timing of the event of last night, the severity of it. It was important for this board to address the town, as well as anyone that had any questions, as well as hear from Wind Waste. So I apologize for the venue. If we need to move forward with another meeting of this type, we'll make sure that the Town Hall Auditorium is available. So again, this is not going to go away. We will hold Wynn accountable. We will require upgrades, both to maintenance or air quality monitoring or a better communication loop. I think these are all no-brainers. So again, just for the general public, both here and on the TV, this board will act. I've been the chairman here for, God, too long. Geez, I think I'm going on 12 years. And I know what authority we have, and I'm not afraid to use it. Neither are my current board members. So we will act. We will be open and honest with the public, both through social media, direct contacts. I'm pretty sure everyone in town has my cell phone number. It certainly seems that way. And my email. I'm open to any questions anyone may have. I'm readily available. So again, we will act, and we will report out what those actions are. Sooner, I hope, rather than later. And having said that, would anyone on the board like to make a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn this emergency meeting to
The chair will second for purposes of further discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.